Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, back with our Wednesday guest, the lovely Anna Kelly. Hi, Anna.
Hi, great to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Now, that first episode got me kind of fired up a little bit. So if you haven't watched that, folks, your retirement accounts are under attack. So go watch that. We're going to flip the script in this one, Anna, and I'm going to let you know about an event that I'm creating a PowerPoint for because I need your help. Okay.
Awesome. Happy to help.
So Bill Allen, one of my Mount Rushmore investors, which means, the top 4 or 5 in the country, has asked me to present at Flip Hacking Live. I will unfortunately not be able to attend given scheduling, but I am creating content so I can give it to him and he could share it with the audience as a pre-read, if you will. And one of the things he asked me for was look ahead, and basically look ahead 10 years and make some predictions for your topic. So as you know, you and I are real estate investors. We're going to stay mainly single family home in this case. But I have a draft of things I want to show to you. Give me more, take some away, all that stuff. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right. So again, it's a draft. Be gentle.
I will. By the way, I just recently met Bill Allen. So we have a common connection that's in the multifamily space. That's Jason and Pili Yarusi.
Yes.
And I spoke at an online event with him and got to meet him a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I love all 3 of those individuals. I've spoken to Bill Allen many times, and I always mispronounce her name. Pili, right?
Pili, yes.
Yeah, Pili. And
Pili Aloha.
Yes, they're wonderful.
It's amazing. Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. All right. So this is actually 2 pages because I couldn't get it to 1. And again, this is a brain dump. So number 1, inflation. I think it's going to be bad for longer. I've been saying that now. It looks like Jerome Powell's starting to agree. I think it's probably, at least in my crystal ball, it's bad for at least the first 5 years of the decade. But I think when we average the decade, it will be higher than most people expect.
Yes, scratch through the word transitory inflation.
Yeah,
this is a midterm to long-term inflationary, decade. I agree with you. I think it's going to be longer than most people think.
Yeah, and again, what I went to next is I'm most worried, or not worried. I think the stuff that's yet to show up in CPI and PPI and this whole transitory, used cars and airline tickets and all that nonsense, which are transitory, is wages have just started going up. And as my 50 years of research have showed, when wages go up, y'all spend more money and we're not creating more assets. So stuff goes up. So assets will go up, and man, rent equivalent, it is just started. And so, yeah, I think those 3 things continue.
Yes, I do agree that assets, CPI, costs of goods, rents are all going to continue to go up. They always do with inflation. Mm-hmm. I kind of wonder a little bit about wages, Michael, just something to think about, right? So wages are having to go up. So we do see, especially when people were given $600 a week extra, $2,400 a month extra to not work.
Yeah.
I know business owners through many different industries and in multiple states who could not get people to work for less than $20, $25 an hour plus benefits to do jobs as simple as mowing grass, right? Mm-hmm. So they could not keep up with their customer demand without paying people more, and therefore their cost of their services had to go up.
Yep.
At some point, people can't continue to pay. So the question is, I'm also seeing restaurants shuttering and closing at 4 p.m. instead of being open till 10, right?
Yep.
How many businesses just start working with fewer people and not raising wages, but laying off? So I wonder what's going to happen to employment.
Okay.
Even though wages go up, I think that's going to result in some higher unemployment.
I agree.
Could be wrong, but I think that's where we're heading.
I think by probably 2024, 2023, that's where we are, because automation and deflationary activities will kind of pick up, but it won't be this year and it won't be next year because that takes investment. But yeah, I think that's one of the nasty surprises later in the decade. Yeah. I'm actually deflation. Yeah.
Yeah. Because inflation always has kind of this, other side of it as things as it becomes too much.
Yeah.
And bad things start to happen. Right.
Yeah.
And then rent suddenly can't keep up, and then people can't afford to pay as much. And then businesses go under, people get laid off, and then it kind of swings the other way. So just wanted to throw that out there.
No, that's why we're doing this. I am already going to add. Yeah. See, this is why I do this.
Awesome.
Here's one. Higher interest rates are coming.
Ding,
But
ding, ding.
ding, ding. Yeah, that one might be a layup.
Yeah.
The question, of course, is how high. And, I'm not going to put a number on it, but they're going to be higher in a decade than they are today. How much higher? Good question, right?
I would bet a whole lot of money that you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
too.
Think about it, folks. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, rates were in the 5% range, right? For most investors.
Yeah.
And now I just got my home for 2.6%. Crazy.
Amazing.
In 2003, I believe our home mortgage, and we had good credit, was like 8.75%.
Yeah. No, I bought something then. Yeah.
Not more than a decade ago. So where we are today is historically low for historically long, and rates have to go up. Because what happens too is the government, at some point, inflation starts to get so high that the only way they can kind of cool things off and keep prices from going too crazy is they raise the borrowing rate.
Yep.
And if they raise the borrowing rate, people can't as easily get their hands on money to go buy all the stuff. And so the demand basically backs off to drive prices back down. So rates have to go up when we're in inflationary times.
Totally agree. Next up, higher taxes. And then I'm going to make a point here that inflation is a tax, and inflation hits everyone, and it hits the people at the lowest end the most.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're already seeing, we just talked in episode 1 about ways that the government's going to get more tax dollars at higher rates.
Yep. The beast has to be fed.
Yes.
Next up, affordable housing is a national crisis. And then I like to say that no one is paid to fix. So again, if you know that that's a crisis, go get affordable homes, right? Go buy the 1950s and 60s and 70s homes and just rent them out, right? I get asked all the time by new investors, should I buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath? I'm like, I own a whole lot of 3-1s. They just make sense. The math works.
Yes. So talk to me about this. When you say no one paid to fix, what do you mean by that?
There's not an agency. There's not a company. There's not, because I can't tell you how many times, maybe it's a California thing. Affordable housing crisis. Everything's above the median. The median keeps going up. Nobody can afford to buy a home. It's just, and then, all the new homes that are built, at least in California, are above the median. So we're not replenishing, the bottom.
Right. I see what you mean. Right. And as you talked about, and as you showed over the last 50 years of housing data, do we really have an affordable housing crisis?
No.
In the average annual household income price range and above, there's definitely not.
Yeah.
But I think in the below average income, range, there is, and that's why we have rental properties, because
exactly.
Half of the country are renters, and so. I think that's a really good point. The agencies aren't doing anything to really fix it, other than the one thing that I'd keep an eye on is they are looking at landlords to fix it. So rent controls.
Yeah, which is not a fix, by the way.
Rents. It's not a fix, but to them, it's their legislative attempt to fix it. It results in people leaving those properties and leaving those states and not investing in the nice, safe, clean housing and the affordable housing market. But
go look at San Francisco and New York if you need to see what happens with rent control.
Yeah.
Next up, I do think I think you're going to see smaller homes and smaller apartments, right? The McMansions of the 90s and 2000s are going to go. I think the average new home is going to be smaller than it was the last 5 years.
Tell me why that is.
I just think I just think that in order to make an attempt at affordable housing, you're going to be like in California, for example, they just adopted Gavin Newsom just got rid of the single family zoning. So basically now you can easily add a mother-in-law unit in the back.
Oh, I see.
Right. So again, you're going to see more housing in the same footprint. And
I see what you're saying. And yes, as construction costs go up, especially, right? And if we have inflation, even if this was transitory supply chain issues that caused a lot of building materials to go up so far, if inflation happens, then a lot of those increases in building supplies are more permanent and lasting. And so any new stock is going to be more expensive per unit to build. And I agree with you, in order to keep the rents in the range that most can afford, they're going to have to go smaller. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Another one that I'm playing with, I don't know if this is coming, but again, I'm making a 10-year reach. I think the 3D home or the container home or the tiny home, one of these, if not a couple of them, are going to take off. And, you'll see, 3D communities or container or tiny home communities, not just these little one-off, toy things. When I look ahead to a decade, I think one of these, if not a couple, take off.
So I know what two of these are, Michael, but I don't know what one of these are. When you say 3D, are they 3D printed homes?
Essentially, yeah. Essentially, you basically get basically how it works. They've only done a couple. They've done them in Texas and Virginia and a couple other spots. But basically, it's a big old cement mixer, and they're design, and they just print the walls, right? Yeah. And then the roof is still lumber. But
almost like a modular home,
exactly.
But it's literally being 3D printed. It's amazing what technology does. I've studied a little bit of 3D printing and all kinds of like medical device applications and stuff, but I didn't actually ever hear that someone has now 3D printed a home. So
they have.
It's amazing. I do know a couple people who have container and tiny home communities that they're building, and they've done really, really well.
I bet.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a trend that's heading in that direction.
Yeah. Another one I think is coming, and I think we've been introduced to it with the moratoriums, is the 40-year mortgage. It would not shock me that sometime in this decade, the 40-year mortgage overtakes the 30-year in popularity.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Make you pay more, but let you spread it out over lots and lots of payments and get interest on it.
Yeah, just gosh. All right, so a couple more. I'm a study of history, and we're going to have between 1 and 3 recessions. The business cycle is real, and it's going to happen.
Yes. I mean, I would argue, and I think I have in some other episodes as well, that I think we're still pretty well in recessionary territory, because we're only artificially propped up. Businesses have been given extra money to stay open and keep people employed. Families, I just got another $700 or $1,700 deposited in my checking account from the IRS that I don't want, right? So if they're going to keep propping up the economy with money, we feel like things are great because we have this extra money in our pocket, but it's all artificial, right? Yeah. When the money dries up, we're still back where we were at the end of the top of the cycle, heading toward a recession at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. So, I actually think a recession is in the very near future. I've been talking about that for a while, and I might be off, but these are the numbers I saw for last month. Inflation's at 5.2%. Oh no, this is a Q3 call. That's what it was. They're expecting inflation at 5.2%, but GDP growth at 4%. I'm looking at that going, that certainly seems like a recession to me, because yes, it's growing 4%, but inflation's 5%. So if you do the math, that's like a negative 1.2. What are you guys talking about?
Right. And it's only growing because you've given us the money to keep spending.
Oh, it's just crazy.
So I agree with you. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Another one I'm just starting to think about. Again, I've done a lot of research here in the last couple of weeks about Japan's lost decade after they were, huge success in the 80s. I think China may have just started what will become or be known as the lost decade for them, with all their move from, semi-capitalism to socialism, clearly taking away wealth, hitting tech, education, video games, now properties. Who knows what's next? I think China could very easily have a lost decade, and people aren't talking about that.
Yeah. No, I really haven't had my pulse enough on China. I do know, you really opened my eyes about, the big company that was going to maybe Evergrande, that maybe could cause some ripples. And we, like the next week, we saw ripples, right?
Yep.
I do know that China, the returns that investors and the wealthy in China can make there are nothing, which is why they buy so much US real estate. Mm-hmm. So I knew that, they can make much better money here than there because of the cost of everything. Mm-hmm. But I really haven't studied China's economy well enough to really understand it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, this is a call that's changing right now. And it's if you were going to use baseball as an analogy, and I don't like to use sports analogy, but it's the only thing I know.
I love baseball.
Yeah. So the game hasn't even started, right? They're still warming up, right? So this is not even like China's in the first inning of a lost decade. I just see the recipe I actually see the recipe for them to crush the spirit of the consumers unknowingly, right? They've taken away $1 trillion in stock market wealth. Now the property market, they're not going to prop up. And again, the middle class in China owns 1.5 homes on average. If you whack that 20 or 30% by a fire sale of properties, I mean, this is an early call. It could go away tomorrow, but I think China's going to have a lost decade. If I'm asked to make a 10-year call right now, this is on the list.
Yeah. Wow. How do you think that impacts us here in the US?
Well, first and foremost, I think U.S. capital is not going to be treated well there, right? We've invested a lot of money in capital. I think U.S. businesses like Nike and Tesla and Apple are not treated well. So I actually think it will have a positive impact on I think more manufacturing comes home, like real manufacturing.
Right.
I think capital flight to China stops or goes to a trickle. Yeah, I think China's building up walls that they don't want the West's money or West stuff. So yeah,
very interesting. Love it.
So another thing I think is coming is government programs to help first-time home buyers. Because again, you mentioned the 50-year chart. It is very affordable on a payment basis, but we are starting to get stretched on down payment.
Yes.
Right. So I see programs coming in probably a couple over the next decade or so.
Yes. And our government doesn't learn.
No.
I was in banking at Bank of America in 1997 to 1998 when the Community Redevelopment Act came through. And we had quotas for making sure that we did enough loans for first-time home buyers who didn't have any money to get into their properties. We had to change our credit criteria to lower it and put them through a 1 or 2 night class on budgeting their money.
That's funny.
Hoping that they would learn how to make their mortgage payment on time.
They're signing up for hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. You put them through a 2-day class. That is comical.
Yeah, 2 nights, maybe
2 nights,
7 or 8
not
hours,
even days.
Right?
Oh my God.
Right. And then and we saw where that led. And so it's hard. You know, my bleeding heart says I want home ownership for people that normally can't afford it. But if you give people fish without teaching them how to fish, it never works out well. So
agreed.
I see that coming along with the 40-year mortgage to make home ownership more possible for people.
That's the story. Then there are generational trends that are undefeated, right? Baby boomers will get older. Generation X will get older, millennials and Gen Z. And the last two for sure, they're entering home buying years. Baby boomers, right? What's going to go on with them? Will they downsize? Will they move to warm states? Then there's the poor Generation X kind of slammed in the middle, which I believe both of us are a part of. And
yes, how can we be in the middle, Michael?
I know.
I rebel.
I don't like that.
I'm 46 and Gen X, I still feel like I'm like 26, right?
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah, we're kind of in that creeping at middle age.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's just generational trends there. And I don't know what they're going to be, but once it happens, it will happen for that generation, right? There'll be trends going on.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see, a lot of the millennials, and there's conflicting studies about, what do millennials really want? I mean, a lot of them are buying homes, but I do see a lot of the younger generation, my son's generation, and he's 18, and I have lots of nieces and nephews that are in their early 20s, and they're renting. They want to be able to travel and pick up and go anywhere they want and not be tied down to a home. So I think that there is still, even though, yes, millennials, just like Gen X and baby boomers, eventually we have kids and we want to settle down and move to the suburbs and find good schools. But millennials are waiting longer to get married. They're having fewer kids. And a lot of them are opting also for, after having forced online school through the pandemic, many are moving to very creative ways to educate their kids where they don't have to put them in a brick and mortar so that they can get up and travel. I've got some friends who literally are traveling the country doing online hybrid homeschooling and letting their kids explore and learn through all of their travels. So I think people become less tied down to a home and start to kind of want to continue to rent or trade houses. People are literally trading their homes. You come to Europe for 3 months, I'll come to the US, we'll live in each other's homes, right? So I'm real interested to see how long that trend lasts. And if it's something that's more lasting or more, just kind of
event driven.
Event driven, right?
Yeah. And then look at that. I actually had it on the list. Could deflation happen sometime this decade, because I think you're right. I think inflation, I see inflation for the next 2 or 3 years, it's just building right now, right? And then, yeah, you're right. It does have that negative feedback loop, which can be deflationary. So yeah, I have it as the wrap up on this slide.
Yeah. And it's, it's really tough to kind of predict because as we've said a few times, right? We don't have a crystal ball, and we look at the past and we say, what has the past taught us about, expansions and contractions and the tops before the bottoms? And we can kind of see general trends, but because we've had this pandemic thrown into the midst when everything was heading toward recession, lots of things were in the hyper supply, and suddenly it changed. Where are people living? Where are they moving? Are they moving to the suburbs? Are they moving to the city? Every region's a little bit different. How are people spending money? Is their psyche so rocked that their job could go away, that their contracts aren't worth anything, that they could have to get a vaccine that they might not want in order to go to work? I mean, there's all kinds of things that I think get into a consumer psyche that impact the way we spend money, and they impact demand. So while getting more money keeps demand up because we're going and spending it on TVs and different things that we didn't have before, there's also this like sudden fear of loss of income, right? So how is the consumer psyche of these events going to change how we come out of it, and how long we're in any recession, and how long we're in inflation? And I don't think we've ever really had anything like this that was so global that we really know what's the lasting impact of this on the consumer psyche, and how that impacts supply and demand. Because ultimately, economics 101, it all comes down to supply and demand. Amen. And supply and demand and how we're taxed on our dollars are the two biggest things that impact whether we go into recession or contraction and how we come out of it. So it's interesting. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I tend to think like you do. I mean, assuming there's going to be up, we're going to have inflation, and at the end of it, it's going to come back down, and we're going to be right back at the same cycle. So that's something that's pretty predictable. You have a recession, you have expansion, and usually, Michael, if I'm not incorrect, I think they usually last about 10 years.
Yeah.
Historically.
Yeah. Top to bottom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, so thank you for doing that. How can people find you and be part of your world?
Great. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn on REI Mom Kelly. And you can find me at my website, greaterpurposecapital.com, where we invest in communities to make a meaningful impact while we create strong returns.
Very cool. Go check it out, folks. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Michael.